Watson and Robinson is on WebEx,
Okay.
but he doesn't. Three it is.
Second. Ready in the back. Okay. Good morning. It is 11:03 a.m. You are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting, Tuesday, December 3rd, at the City Council chambers. We have 3 voting members here. Today, we have 1 commissioner remote and 1 commissioner is excused. Okay, I was told we have a few people looking to speak potentially on the topic today. We'll take public comment, but I'd like to remind everyone this is not a public hearing per se, so the comment will be limited to what's on the agenda, and we would ask you to keep it to 3 minutes or less. Did we have anyone sign up? No sign-ups? Well, if someone's here would like to speak, we'll take them first come, first serve. Where we? Sure, come on up, state your name. Oh, I'm sorry, right here at the podium.
My name is Christy Schweiss, and I just wanted to say a few things about the fluoride. In a study of 299 mother-child pairs in Mexico, higher prenatal exposure to fluoride in the range of exposure levels reported for pregnant women in other areas was associated with lower cognitive function in the children of ages 4 and 6 to 12 years old. The collective exposure of children to fluoride in drinking water is a major public health threat. Going back to Grand Jean's study, showing that even very low exposures to fluoride in utero are toxic, Canet explained. He said, right now, the damage to children's brains in the United States is probably greater for fluoride than it is for lead, arsenic, and mercury. Now he's not saying that atom fluoride is more toxic than lead, mercury, or arsenic. He's just saying if you look at what's happening today, fluoride is doing more damage to our kids' brains than these other well-known neurotoxic substances, lead, mercury, and arsenic. The reason, of course, is the exposure. There are millions of children that are being exposed to fluoridated tap water on a daily basis, millions of pregnant women. And I just want to say, I hope that we can stop this, and I know other states are getting rid of the fluoride, and I hope that we can too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Sure. Hi, please state your name.
Good morning. My name is Michael Bouch.
Thank you.
I know that you guys have received a lot of emails, especially about the 7-year court case that was settled, and the EPA has to make some changes, obviously, to their regulation. But one of the things that was probably sent to you was a recent interview with Mike Conant on the High Wire, and I want to just play just a couple minutes worth of his interview because it's very poignant to not only this on the fluoridation side, but a lot of other things that are going on government-wise.
What you were looking at and how you were speaking to these people in court. We have a video of this, and we're talking about the safety standards of fluoride. Let's take a look.
So I'm moving now to topic 7 of the deposition notice, which reads, what NSF has done, if anything, to determine the potential for fluoridation chemicals to cause neurotoxic effects. So let me ask you, has NSF taken any steps to determine the potential for fluoridation chemicals to cause neurotoxic effects?
No.
Does NSF have any position on whether fluoridation chemicals can cause neurotoxic effects?
Since we have not conducted our own risk assessment on the fluoridation chemicals, we do not have a position on whether they are able to cause neurotoxic effects.
Okay. Has NSF taken any steps to determine the upper tolerable daily dose of fluoride that will not cause neurotoxic effects in humans?
We have not.
Does the NSF have a position on what the upper tolerable daily dose of fluoride that will not cause neurotoxic effects is?
Since we have not conducted risk assessments on any of the fluoridation chemicals, we do not have a position on the daily dose that would be appropriate to prevent or to reduce the risk for neurotoxic effects from fluoride exposure.
Now, she was from the NSF, and that's kind of like a company. It's something outside of the government. This is something that regulates these chemicals in things like water. So did you find that astonishing when she answered like that?
Well, I didn't find it astonishing. It's what I expected, but it was good to have it confirmed. The NSF is a private organization that certifies the chemicals that are added to drinking water. EPA delegated that authority to them in the 1980s. But I asked those same questions to the EPA, to the CDC, and to the FDA, as well as to the three major companies in this country that sell fluoridation chemicals to water municipalities for fluoridation. I asked all of them, can you point me to any study that shows that adding fluoridation chemicals to drinking water is safe for the brain? Okay, just one. I wasn't asking for hundreds. I was just asking for one. And every one of those
like 30
organizations
seconds.
came back and said, we are not aware of any safety data on that point. And to put that in perspective, in local debates on fluoridation, the proponents of this practice will often say, there's thousands of studies.
Yeah.
Thousands of studies that show that the fluoridation is safe, right? And here I had the opportunity, under penalty of perjury, to ask these organizations, I'm not asking you for thousands of studies, can you point me to one study on this particular issue of the effects on the brain?
So as we watch this next step of the current administration coming in, we're going to look at this on the level of fluoridation, on vaccinations, on everything. Those vaccinations were never actually tested for safety either. We're going to hear this over and over
Okay,
again.
that's-
I understand that. I'm just saying as a
All right.
whole, it's all the same. So
All right.
I understand.
I would ask, though, if you could email it information to, you could send it to me or to Mr. Lindman so that we can properly vet it and put it into the record, because I didn't get the source of that, so.
Okay. It's Michael
Appreciate it.
Condon that actually did he was actually the attorney that
Okay.
won the case.
What's your address here in the city of Wausau?
1717 Mulligan Drive,
And it's-
Wausau, Wisconsin.
Okay, what's the name of the street?
Mulligan Drive,
Oh, okay.
Greenwood Hills area.
And the lady that was up before to it, like her address?
Christy, your address?
617 South 20th Avenue, Wausau.
Thank you. Please state your name. And again, we're not conducting a public hearing here, so this is really informational. So appreciate you keeping it on point. Thank you.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Sandy Bouch. I live at 1717 Mulligan Drive in Wausau. I guess my concern is just something you look at overall. You know, if you look at your toothpaste bottles, it says right on there, if a child under the age of 6 ingests more than a pea-size amount of that toothpaste, that you're supposed to call the Poison Control Center. And when you look at a child or any individual as a whole, you know, you start your day out, you take a shower, your water has fluoride in it. You have a cup of coffee, you have 2 cups, 3 cups, that all has fluoride in it. And then you go brush your teeth. You cook your pasta in water, and that all has fluoride in it. And it's coming through you at all directions. Now that's ingesting it, so when you go to the dentist, you know, that's a topical application, which is different than ingesting into your bodies. I guess some products in the in our history have been deemed safe. Lead, cigarettes, alcohol, cocaine, all these things were once deemed healthy for you, as fluoride has been deemed healthy, but in fact, we find out it is not, lead, all of that. I guess, when you look at with children and babies, they're getting formula, so they're getting water in their formula, they're getting water in their mixes for their cereals. They're drinking water, it's in their skin for baths. I guess, where is the safety studies that prove that there is no harm? And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anyone? All right. We will have two presentations on the matter coming up here shortly. And part of the reason why we are doing this is obviously there's new studies, there's new cases that have been settled, and we want to make sure that we're presenting as much data as we can to the public and to the commission, and then the commission will consider. We also lean on our regulatory agencies. Sometimes that may seem like it takes some time, but we are in contact with them as well as we move forward on this issue. So item number 1 today is to approve the minutes from the November 4th meeting, 2024. I would entertain a motion.
I so move.
Motion from Gene.
Oh, I'll second.
Second from Mr. Force.
Thank you.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed? Well, that passes 3-0. Up next is a director's report, and we have a list of items here to cover that is in the packet. First item is update on the water treatment facility. I'll turn it over to Mr. Lindman, who's our director.
Thanks, Mayor. So the first two items are on our 2020, the DNR, the Safe Drinking Water Loan, and the Clean Water Fund loan that we used to build the new water treatment facility as well as upgrade the wastewater treatment facility. The Clean Water Fund loan has been closed with the DNR. We're finalizing some closeout documents here to provide them, so that all should take place over the next month or two. The water treatment facility loan is still open. There's a few items, both warranty items on the treatment facility as well as some lockout, tagout project work that yet is ongoing. But we hope to have that complete over the next probably 30 to 45 days on that. So both of those loans will be in closeout position here shortly. Any questions on those two items at this point? No. Okay. Next is an update on the granular activated carbon at the water treatment facility. That new treatment process is online. Has been since, was it last week is when they started it up, Scott? Yeah. So it's been on for several days now. Our PFAS levels will be and have been below DHS recommendations as well as down to non-detect. So moving forward, this is our long-term solution for PFAS treatment to get down to non-detect levels and stay below any upcoming regulations for PFAS. So there's still some updates on some programming and things like that. That's going to happen over the next month or so. So I think John has some questions.
Oh, Mr. Robinson.
So I apologize for not being there today, but do we have, are we continuing to see the shorter chain PFAS breaking through? Or are we not seeing that? And have we also addressed the issue of the, we had, I think the bacteria issue or the last meeting? I assume that's been resolved.
The bacteria issue has been resolved, but Scott?
It has. They did a caustic soak on that vessel, and the bacteria issue has been resolved. It was run through after that. We rinsed it, put it in service. We did some testing between the ion exchange and the GAC during startup, and those PFAS samples came back non-detect. So we did not have any short chain breakthrough at that point. And then we, of course, did sampling at each of the 6 vessel chains after that, and those were all non-detect as well.
Question, Mayor?
John? Or Mr. Robinson, you still?
Me too.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Forrest?
I would like to get as complete as possible, a report at our next meeting, which would be January, on the GAC system. We've heard a little bit of snippet here and there at the last meeting and this meeting because you're in the startup phase and you're in the early operation phase. But if it's not possible at January, at least by February, I'd like to have a very thorough report on how that system is working, what the numbers are, what the numbers in and out are. If we've got information on the buildup on the carbon particles, just something more thorough that we can look at. Thank you.
Scott, you're good with that?
We're good with that, yeah.
Okay.
Great. An update on the leachate acceptance plans and schedule moving forward. We have a meeting scheduled with the DNR. Has that been finally established, Ben?
It'll be next Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Yeah, right. So, so that's moving forward actually with, that cooperation with the Marathon County landfill. We'll keep you up to date on those discussions and then the pilot moving forward with that. Wastewater operations, technician interviews are ongoing right now to bring on those new employees. Same with the collection system interviews. And we did sell the TV van on the government auction. So that information is in there as well.
Question, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
On the interviews, we haven't had a really good track record, Eric, on
Yeah.
hiring people that, even those who have applied and interviewed with us have gone elsewhere. How do you feel about the ones that are you're reporting on today?
How you doing on that, Ben?
Sorry.
Looking at the applications, there's not a lot of experience. There's
Right.
some, so we'll work with what we have and make a decision after the interviews are completed.
Well, I'm also concerned about the willingness of the interviewees to accept the position if they're offered it. That's where we've run afoul of the process on occasion.
Correct.
I just wonder what your feeling is.
I believe it depends on the situation of the person, the applicant, and where they're at, the need for a job, and their willingness to learn. And I guess it's up to them once it's offered to them.
I do also think, Jim, that we run into an issue too if we do have experienced people applying for the positions and where we can offer them wages. So that's another issue that we have. Right now, I think if we have somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience or no experience, then it's really just their personal situation. But trying to get experienced people on has been a real challenge.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Jean.
What is a typical starting wage for, let's say, somebody that doesn't have the experience that we would like to see? Or I suppose it's subject to change with the position, but
It is. It's dependent on qualifications, and they start off in the low 20s to start off with.
Anything else on the director's report? All right, up next, item 3 is discussion and update with a presentation on the final results for the GAC pilot study. And we have Susan here from Donahue, and I think, is that Andrew on the line
Yep.
as well? Okay.
Andrew Dow, the process engineer who has worked on the pilot study and also on design and really been involved through the whole treatment system and PFAS system here online. He's going to try to share his screen if our technology cooperates and walk you through the presentation. Yay. Yep, we can see your screen, Andrew.
Okay, and how's my audio on your end?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to provide an update on this project. First of all, we're glad to report, as Eric Lindman noted, that the PFAS treatment system project is considered substantially complete, and the Wausau Waterworks staff has assumed operation of the new GAC treatment facility. In the photo on the right there, you can see the new building on the left-hand side housing the new GAC treatment equipment next to the original process building for the drinking water facility. This photo was taken as of November 1st of this year. And beyond an update on the project status, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to briefly summarize some of the key insights from the PFAS removal pilot study that was conducted, as well as the first 2 years of operation of the new drinking water treatment facility. Essentially, what have we learned so far, and what can we expect looking forward toward the full-scale GAC system operation? And so to that end, we will touch on a couple of topics today. The first is just a look at the critical role played by the anion exchange treatment process at the new drinking water facility, both as an interim solution for PFAS while the GAC treatment was being constructed as the long-term and more robust solution, and then also some of the water quality benefits that regenerable ion exchange process provides in terms of color removal, improved disinfection, and pretreatment for the PFAS, the downstream PFAS polishing step that the GAC provides. And then we'll also talk about what to expect going forward for the PFAS treatment system. A couple things to keep in mind are that the new limits for PFOA and the concentrations of PFOA that are measured in the water will dictate the media replacement schedule. In other words, that compound is expected to be the first to break through relative to any of the other regulated compounds that EPA has chosen to regulate. And we can expect 1 to 2 carbon changes of 6 lead vessels per year. And we'll talk more about what that means from a schedule and potential operating cost standpoint. And then, of course, treatment and monitoring going forward will be based on the new federal maximum contaminant levels that were finalized earlier this year. I've just listed the limits for PFOA and PFOS here, which are the 2 compounds that are present at high enough concentrations of Wausau's water that they need to be removed to comply with the limits for the 6 compounds that EPA has regulated at this time. And we are expecting those limits to be formally adopted in Wisconsin in 2026. But in any case, Wausau is already fully prepared to comply with these regulations at the national or state level. So one of the important roles that the regenerable anion exchange process played was removing PFAS concentrations during construction of the GAC treatment system, which is the long-term solution for managing PFAS in the water supply. This graph shows the concentrations, the combined concentration of 3 key compounds that have been measured in the entry point samples, which is the finished water going out to the distribution system from the plant over the past couple of years. And so a couple key things to note on the timeline. One is the commissioning of the new drinking water treatment facility at the end of 2022 that resulted in a decrease in concentration of these compounds. And if you recall, the goal at the time was to keep the combined concentration below 20 nanograms per liter based on DHS recommendations recommendations that were issued at the time. And as the concentrations increased over time, the intent was to replace the anion exchange resin as needed to keep concentrations below that target. And so that was done in the third quarter of 2023, as soon as it was possible to do so, and it became apparent that that was necessary. And since then, the concentrations have, as expected, increased somewhat over time, but stayed well below 20 parts per trillion up until the recent commissioning of the GAC treatment system. And fortunately, only one resin change was required over that time frame, which was beneficial from a cost standpoint. But beyond treatment, or beyond providing an interim solution for PFAS, that ion exchange process at the new plant will remain in place for its original intended purpose, which was to remove dissolved organic matter from the water. And that provides a number of water quality benefits that are related to PFAS treatment as well as other topics. One benefit of the organic matter removal is that it removes color from the water, so there's an aesthetic improvement there. It's also significantly reducing the concentration of total organic carbon. And this has a number of benefits, including water quality in the distribution system piping to customers. It supports a more robust disinfection process without creating harmful or high levels of disinfection byproducts. And it supports compliance with new and future regulations, whether that's providing pretreatment for PFAS removal, as has been pursued now, or supporting, like I mentioned, the more robust disinfection process at the new facility, which includes contact with free chlorine for potential pathogen inactivation, like virus inactivation prior to adding ammonia to the water, or the chloramine residual in the city's distribution system piping. And on that topic of disinfection, the disinfectant residual and water quality benefits in the distribution system, one thing that's been a very positive observation since the new plant went online is that the chlorine residual, the disinfectant residual throughout the distribution system has notably improved. In fact, the operators have been able to reduce the disinfectant dose at the plant, or reduce the concentration of the chlorine residual leaving the treatment facility while maintaining much higher disinfectant residuals throughout the system. So you can see in this figure in red text are the average disinfectant residual in the system in 2022 before the new plant went online, and then the average disinfectant residual over the past couple of years. And so despite being able to lower the disinfectant concentration at the plant, there's a higher residual even at the fringes or outskirts of the system where water age is high, and it's typically more challenging to maintain a high or adequate residual. And the last comment on that is what we've also noticed is that at several of these sites, the average concentration of free ammonia is lower currently, which makes sense because ammonia is released when chlorine reacts with demand in the system. So the combination of better chlorine residual, lower free ammonia means less potential for microbiological activity in the piping, which can lead to corrosion or other issues if it's not under control. So definitely a positive observation that's largely or directly attributable to the anion exchange treatment and the reduction in organic carbon in the water. And then the last comment in terms of benefits of the anion exchange that we've seen and that reduction in total organic carbon is the important role it plays in improving the performance of downstream polishing for PFAS removal and the operating costs of that PFAS removal process. So these graphs here are some data from the complete set of pilot testing data that was collected. In this case, this is for a pilot test looking at single-use ion exchange resin as a PFAS polishing technology downstream of the regenerable ion exchange that's in place at the new plant. Simpler concept to using the GAC that you have now. And what you see is that in the graph on the left, that's single-use ion exchange as a PFAS polishing step with the regenerable ion exchange pretreatment included. And then on the right is the same type of resin operating without that ion exchange pretreatment like you have in a new facility. And what we see is a much earlier breakthrough of long chain PFAS, including PFOA, which means that that process would be much more expensive to operate and comply with the treatment goals for PFOA or potentially other compounds. So it just highlights the benefit that ion exchange process provides in optimizing the operating costs for PFAS removal. And that same trend, we would expect that trend to be the same for your GAC system, if not more pronounced. It just the pilot test didn't include that same side-by-side comparison for GAC. And then as far as the pilot test data for GAC operation, this graph is showing the concentration of two key compounds that are included in the new regulation, PFOA and PFOS. These are the effluent concentrations leaving the GAC pilot column. And here the data is presented in terms of the equivalent full-scale volume treated at Wausau's plant. So scaling up that small pilot column to your full-scale 12-vessel GAC system. And so what we can see is that PFOA does break through earlier and would be driving the timing of change out. And over the course of the pilot, we did not see the effluent concentration go above the new regulatory limit. But we've noted here, based on this data, that you could anticipate changing out the lead bed of GAC somewhere around somewhere after about a billion gallons of water have been treated through the system. And just to expand a little bit more on how that would work and how the system will operate to maintain low concentrations at all times, this diagram shows the lead lag arrangement of the full-scale GAC vessels. So the 12 vessels are arranged in 6 pairs, and within each pair there's a lead vessel and a lag vessel. And the lead vessel, all the water flows to the lead vessel first, followed by the lag vessel. So in addition to having the ability to sample what's coming out of the lead vessel, there are also sample ports throughout the GAC beds. So the operations team can monitor when PFOA is detectable or breaking through in the GAC vessels. And once there are detectable or threshold concentrations, mostly through the bed or leaving the lead bed, that can trigger scheduling a carbon replacement for that lead bed. And by the time the lead bed is replaced, there would ideally be some detectable PFOA in the lag bed to make sure that the lead bed is being more fully utilized, but the concentration in the effluent of the lag bed and what's going out to the system and to customers would still be well below the MCL. And then at that point, what was formerly the lag bed becomes the lead, and it starts out with some PFOA detectable in the bed, but still non-detect or below the MCL coming out, and it would be operated in that manner until there's a breakthrough of what has now become the lead bed. And so having that lead lag arrangement really provides a nice barrier and some flexibility to minimize concentrations of PFOA or other compounds of interest in the treated effluent. So just a couple more slides here. This one is just to provide some perspective on potential operating cost projections based on what we can extrapolate or project from the pilot data that we have. So basically, the blue bars represent our conservative, I would call it, estimate based on carbon change-out timing, where this would be replacing the lead beds approximately every 5 months. And then the orange bars are more of a 9-month time frame that is based on modeling that the carbon supplier did using our pilot test data. And in addition to this, we've just also provided some perspective on potential opportunities to reduce or minimize those costs in the long term, one of which relates to the type of carbon that is being used. So the carbon that's in the full-scale system is the same carbon that was used in the pilot study, but this carbon that the city purchased for this initial fill is a pre-treated version that's pre-treated to reduce leachables in the carbon that can be present upon startup and initial flushing of the media. So it minimizes concentrations of arsenic, for example, in that initial rinse water. And that was important for the startup when all 12 of the vessels had to be filled and started up at the same time. There could be opportunities going forward to look at purchasing the standard version of that carbon, which would provide some cost savings and some transportation savings because it's a little less dense. And then lastly, for a facility of this size, it would certainly be feasible for this supplier and not uncommon to purchase reactivated carbon, where the utilities carbon is kept separate and reactivated at the supplier's facility. And then a portion of fresh carbon is about 20% is blended into that. That can reduce the cost by about 30%. But that would have to be, there'd have to be discussions with DNR as to whether they would allow that and what that approval process would look like. And just as a data point here, there's a treatment plant in North Carolina that uses granular activated carbon for PFAS removal. Their facility was completed in 2022, I believe, and they're spending about $4.1 million a year on reactivated GAC. So their GAC reactivation and replacement for about $650 per million gallons treated. So that's just a reference point for what others in the industry are similarly facing. The last thing I do want to point out on this, which is good news, is that $1.6 billion EPA grant money has been earmarked to use for initial carbon replacements. And that will be beneficial because really the best estimate we'll have of how often the carbon will be replaced long term and what those operating costs are is once the city is able to get through the first 2 or 3 carbon changes over the first 1 to 2 years. That will really help lock in a better estimate or the best available estimate of what that carbon usage rate will be. So just some concluding comments here. Just wanted to recap on some of the benefits of granular activated carbon as a selected treatment solution for this topic. Of course, in addition to being an effective removal technology for PFAS, it does remove a variety of organic and emerging contaminants should they be present or necessary to remove in the future. It provides additional aesthetic polishing. In other words, removing additional like color or taste and odor if it's present, as well as additional TOC removal. And it does offer simpler management of spent media compared to other technologies because the carbon suppliers will take the media and manage the disposal or reactivation of it. But then lastly, looking ahead, it is worth noting that the facility is also set up to accommodate other media options in the future. Should there be a driver for that in terms of balancing water quality quality needs versus operating costs. And that includes the ability to use single-use ion exchange resin in place of GAC, or even more novel and emerging adsorbent media, such as the Fluorosorb product, that can be even more selective for PFAS and less impacted by background constituents such as organic carbon. So that was what we had prepared for the update on this today. If there are any questions, though, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Jean?
As Andrew was going through the presentation and speaking on chlorine residual in the distribution system, Scott can speak to this, or Eric can speak to it, but I'd observed on the west side there was a lot of flushing, and we were wasting water, and I don't believe we need to do that, or it's minimal at this point in time. So that's truly a benefit, because we're not processing the water and to maintain the residual in the system, and then dumping part of it to enhance the residual at that location. So I think that should be part of, as a positive with the new treatment plant and how we're disinfecting.
Mr. Robinson?
I have a couple of questions. When did, I don't know if I heard clearly, when does changeout occur at how many gallons, million gallons?
We're estimating, based on a conservative projection from the pilot data, that it would be after about 1 billion gallons treated through the plant. 1 billion gallons. 1 billion. So
billion, okay. Right, and then I noticed in one of the charts early on that the initial ion exchange resin was less successful in removing the PFAS than the refreshed or the second batch of ion. Do you have any explanation on that, or any thoughts on why one resin was more successful than the other?
yeah, that's a good question. I have a couple of theories, but I don't have a definitive answer on it. One possibility is that the original resin was subjected to a lot of use, and during the construction and commissioning period for the new facility, before the facility officially went online, was sort of starting already with a lot of use and potential capacity exhaustion that had occurred. Whereas we got sort of a true fresh start in September of last year when the new resin, the current resin that's in place, was installed. And it's also possible that, as the operations team has gotten used to running the new plant, just the routine of regenerating the resin regularly and how that process has been going has helped keep TOC and PFAS levels a little more consistent or lower, perhaps.
And my final question deals with the life cycle cost, and you had the chart showing the pre-treated versus standard carbon versus reactivated carbon. Your cost estimates include the cost of disposal and or treatment of the carbon that are, sort of the life cycle cost? And does the reactivated carbon give us a lot more benefit in terms of mitigating future liability?
Yeah, so in terms of whether that is included, that is included in the unit cost of the carbon at any cost for like hauling away and disposal, like the total life cycle cost of the carbon that's purchased. I have seen a lot of data published in the industry, and in fact, the Cape Cedar facility has indicated they've found the same, that reactivated carbon does remove PFAS just as well as the virgin carbon. As far as mitigating future liability, generally one of the benefits of GAC, as I've seen it or understand it, is that when the carbon suppliers take away the spent GAC, they're in effect assuming any liability for that material in terms of how they then reactivate it and use it in downstream markets to dispose of it. But if obviously the regulatory landscape continues to evolve, and I do see sort of a perhaps like a sustainability benefit in having a framework where the city is reusing a lot of the same GAC, perhaps, right? And in kind of a custom reactivation contract where only a certain portion has to be new that's blended in.
Well, those liability protections are only as good as the companies that are providing them, and if they're out of business, they're not there. I would, sort of echo Jim's comments about the desire to have a full presentation on the GAC system. And if we could look at that sort of life cycle, cost liability perspective with the thought of looking stronger at that reactivation versus virgin carbon.
Okay, yeah. So, sounds good. And I think in the coming weeks, we will have more data from the startup of the facility in terms of these full-scale sample results.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Robinson, that's it?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Force?
Nice presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jean?
I would suggest that we also have a tour of the facility. There's usually a lot of benefit, and I don't know if it's easily accessible for staff to conduct that, but
It's pretty open, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But I always learn a lot from visually observing what's going on.
If I may, Mayor?
Yes, Scott?
Yeah, John, your full report, I would suggest that we probably do that in February. That would give us some time with the holidays and then to actually get some information from running the plant. So we'll have some more testing that'll come back by then. PFAS samples right now are taking anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. So we would like to run another set. We'll have another set coming up and then we'll have another set after that. So hopefully we would have two results back by then. We can run the tour sometime in between here and there. And then, I mean, we can have a minor update coming in at.
February sounds fine, Scott.
All right, thank you.
Sounds good.
Anything else? Susan?
No.
Good.
Thank you for your
Andrew?
time.
Thank you, Andrew, Susan. All right, up next, we're presentation rich today. That one went a little longer, so I want to just remind, we've got 2 presentations on the same subject. I think up first is Dr. Cole, and looking at your slides looks data rich. So I want to remind you to give everyone an opportunity and to give the second presenter an opportunity to try to limit this to 10, 12 minutes, and that'll give us a few minutes for questions, because we have other business items as well as some other commissioner commitments. So we don't want to, with only 3 here today, we don't want to run out of time and a quorum. So let's see, we have Dr. Cole up first. Do we have a slide presentation? I have it in the packet.
I do, can I?
Yeah, he can share.
Okay, go
Can I
ahead.
share my screen with you?
Yes, please.
Okay. People over here. Okay. Can y'all see that okay?
Yes. We got
Okay,
you.
great. It takes up the whole screen?
Yeah, it'll work.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so as you mentioned, I am Griffin Cole. I'm a dentist. I'm in my 32nd year of practice. And I too was taught back in dental school way back when that not only is water fluoridation very beneficial, but also very effective and safe. So I just wanted to show you after over 3 decades of practicing that I'll show you that that's actually not true. And I will keep this to 10 minutes or less. So this first slide here is from the CDC. They like to look at 3rd graders. It's a perfect age group. It's about 8 to 9 years old. And if you'll notice, the states with the lowest childhood decay are New Hampshire and Vermont, about a 35% decay rate, and they are 2 of the least fluoridated in the country. So
Doctor, your slide hasn't advanced. Doctor, your slide is not advanced. You're still on the title slide. Thank you.
Oh, I am? Oh. so it's not showing up.
It is not.
Okay, so let me see how we can do this. Can we do it like that? Is that better?
That gets it.
Does that at least show you what,
We can see it now. Go ahead.
hang on, let me just do something here real quick. I want there we go. Is that good right there?
That's good.
Okay, so as I was saying, this is from the CDC. They look at third graders, and you'll notice that in New Hampshire and Vermont, which are two states with the lowest childhood decay in the country, they are two of the least fluoridated, 43rd and 39th respectively. And then if you look at these areas like Washington DC, which is 100% fluoridated, they have a very high 60% decay rate, as does Kentucky at 99.8% fluoridated, and North Dakota at 96. Two states that are not on here, Hawaii, which is does not have a lot of, has a very low water fluoridation rate. They have a very high decay rate as well. And Idaho, which is about in the middle as far as decay rates, very low amount of water fluoridation. The point being that there really is no correlation when you look at the actual numbers. So both the CDC and Health and Human Services, for years, 1.2 parts per million, which is milligrams per liter, was the level of optimal fluoridation. In 2015, they lowered it down to 0.7 because the rates of tooth modeling and fluorosis was increasing across the country. At that point, it was about 41% of kids between age 12 and 15 had these spots on their teeth. And now these rates keep going up, and I'll explain these numbers at the bottom here where it says 70 to 87%. So in the Journal of Dental Research in 2019, the NHANES report, NHANES stands for National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. It's a very detailed research group. They do household interviews, they do extensive questionnaires, a lot of demographic info is taken, and they do it about every decade or so. And they publish their report in the Journal of Dental Research. Pay attention to that first author's name, Chris Nerrat. These were their results. So if you look how they do it, so like in 1986 to 87, they did a study, and fluorosis had increased from 22% up to, in those years, to 41% in 99 through 2004, and 65% in 2011 to 2012. In 2015, when they lowered down to 0.7, they were going off the 99 to 2004 report. Look at the last ones, the 2013 to 2014, 70% now of children have this. And in the latest one, which is 2015-2016, 87%. So these numbers are going up dramatically. And in the Journal of the American Medical Association, they did a study just last year, and they confirmed this. And if you look at their quote at the bottom there, they said, our results also align with those of NeuroRap. That's the study that I just showed you. So they're all agreeing on this as far as the numbers of kids having fluorosis on their enamel. So, is there actual scientific proof of action? I can tell you guys there's never been a double-blinded, randomized clinical trial to prove that it actually works or is safe. And there's never been a long-term follow-up study to prove that it actually worked. I will tell you there are several showing failure, and one that I'm very intimately involved with is San Antonio, Texas. That's my hometown. And they, for years, fought to not fluoridate the water, which is great because I grew up there as a child. I was lucky. But in 2000, they did finally acquiesce. So in 2009, they actually looked to see, has there been changes? So it was a 9-year study from the time they started in 2000, and they looked at the poorer parts, the poorer, the indigent parts of Bexar County, because that's who it's really supposed to benefit, those who really can't afford access to good dental care. And not only did they find that it did not decrease cavities, there was actually a 13% increase in decay. Now, obviously, that has nothing to do with water fluoridation. The point being is that it definitely did not decrease decay. And lastly, silico fluorides, which is what's added to the water. It's not sodium fluoride or naturally occurring calcium fluoride. It's hydrofluorosilicic acid. It is a waste product from both the fertilizer industry and the aluminum manufacturing industry. and they have to do something with it. It's never been FDA approved for ingestion, and they were never proven safe prior to putting in our water supply. Now, pro-fluoridationists will tell you it doesn't matter what form fluoride is once it gets mixed in the water. It is equally, it's dispersed equally in the water, and there's no problem because it completely dissociates, so it doesn't matter. But that was actually disproven in 1975. Johannes Westendorf on his dissertation, which, by the way, he was trying to do a dissertation on the beneficial effects of sodium fluoride, and when he started studying, he realized that they weren't adding that to the water supply, but rather this hydrofluorosilicic acid. And if you look here, if you took the time to actually read this paper, which I have, that hydrofluorosilicic acid does not completely dissociate in the water under physiological conditions. So it's a very different animal than naturally occurring calcium fluoride. This is in Neurotoxicology, a peer-reviewed journal in 2000. They were looking at the association of, again, these silico fluoride-treated water with elevated blood lead. And Masters in Kaufman is a very reputable group of researchers. They look at a lot of the research that's already out there. And this study looked at 151,000 venous blood lead tests taken from children ages birth to 6 in New York State, living in about 105 communities of populations ranging from 15,000 to 75,000. And the results, they found that the average blood lead levels are significantly higher in children living in communities whose water was treated with this fluoridated water. So, as a young dental student back in 1989, I was made aware of this study because it was very recently done at that time. It was the largest one at the time done in our country, and it was funded by the National Institute of Dental Research, 1986-87 landmark study. This was the one where they showed an 18% decay difference in areas that are fluoridated versus not fluoridated, meaning that there was an 18% decay prevention rate. So this made it sound like water fluoridation is working. But there were several researchers, including Carlos Imbrunel and a guy named John Yamayanis, who said, can we see the data? Because we want to see how you got your actual results. And it's important to point out that whenever you're showing results to a study, you're supposed to give the absolute differences and not the relative differences. And why that's important is the relative differences is an average of all samples in each age group. So the problem with that is you can have some children in certain age groups skew the numbers across the board, and more importantly, children that are born in fluoridated communities typically have their first molars erupt 6 months to a year after those children who are born in non-fluoridated areas, and you can look at this in the literature as well. So you're going to get very different numbers if you look at the average of all samples. What you're supposed to do is look at the average for every single child's mouth, all 128 tooth surfaces. So the actual results were not 18% difference in decay rates, but 0.6 tooth surfaces. So less than 1% when Carlos and Brunel went through all the data. And John Yamayanis looked at decayed, missing, and filled teeth and found an absolute difference of less than 1/10 of a tooth. So the numbers were very low. And I want to show you graphs. I promise I won't bore you with this. But this was the graph that they put out. This is the relative difference. And if you look at age 7, which is on the bottom, the x-axis, that bottom, let me see if I can show you with my mouse. This here is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. This is the ages of the children. Look at age 7. Remember, I told you that children in fluoridated communities might have their teeth, their first permanent molars erupt 6 months to a year later. So that was the highest number. They said we saw a 32% difference in decay rates. The average, though, was 18. So pay attention to this y-axis. You'll see it goes from 0 to 35% relative difference. Now, let me show you the absolute difference. It doesn't look that much different, but if you look carefully at the y-axis, these numbers are much lower. So I'm going to put them on the same graph for you. This bottom line, that was the actual difference in decay. So completely, clinically insignificant, as I showed you guys before on the 0.6 tooth. Okay, what about bottle-fed babies? So this is critical, right? Because human breast milk is very low in fluoride. It's about 0.004 parts per million. So obviously a bottle-fed baby where most of their diet is from water, and we're talking about tap water, they can get greater than 100 sometimes up to 250 times the level of mother's milk. So you can't control the dosage, and this is who we're really fighting for. And I know my colleague, Dr. Malin's going to talk about the effects on children's brains, so I won't go there. Cochrane collaboration, this is a group of about 30,000 expert researchers. They're very reputable, even to the pro-fluoridationists. Everybody really respects what the Cochrane group does. And they just came out with this study, this report, just last month. And by the way, if you look at the very bottom of the slide, you'll see that I have a star here for this first one. So pro-fluoridationists will often say there's thousands of studies showing how great it is and how safe it is. And the truth is that these researchers looked at it and said that 80% of all the pro-fluoride studies were from prior to 1975 and of poor quality. So Cochrane went through all the studies and they came up with what they thought were good studies, 22 children's studies and none in adults. The average benefit, what they saw, was about a quarter of 1 tooth. Quote, we could not be sure whether adding fluoride to water reduced tooth decay in children's permanent teeth. Quote, we were unsure whether there were any effects on tooth decay when fluoride is removed from a water supply. And while 1970 studies showed young children in fluoridated areas may have saved as many as 4 cavities in their baby teeth, the most recent study from 2022, which is the Catfish study in England, found a reduction of only 0.16 decayed teeth. This is the sister study to the Lotus study that I'll cover in just a second. So here's the graph showing this. If you look here, this is the number of actual cavities that were saved from fluoridation. This is 1970 here, and as you go across in decades, we're down to almost 0 in current times. And here's the reason why. We have so much exposure to fluoride. I mean, it's in toothpaste, it's in drinks that use any kind of fluoridated water, it's in most dental products, including filling material, sealant material. We have so much access to fluoride now, unfortunately, that we don't need to add it to our water supply anymore. That's why this number has dropped dramatically. 2018, the Iowa Florida study, funded by the National Institutes of Health. This was the most comprehensive project in the United States on fluoride. They looked at children from birth up to about age 24. So it was they started collecting data and looked at it for 27 and a half years. They looked at dental exams, they did dietary analyses, bone scans, detailed questionnaires, and found no significant reduction in cavities at all. So here we go. The 2024 Lotus study just this year in January. This was in UK. It was a 10-year cohort study. They actually looked at about 17.8 million adults aged 12 and up, but they got down to an actual sample of 6.4 million adults, so the largest study really ever. And again, they found that water fluoridation results in maybe 2% fewer cavities, and there was no difference in social inequalities or income levels, and they found that water fluoridation is actually a net economic loss when capital costs are included. So when you hear people say that it's a savings, it really isn't. And finally, my last slide, it's time to end this experiment. This really was an experiment. If you look at the history of water fluoridation, way back in 1945 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, it was supposed to be a 15-year study. They stopped after 5 years and said, let's just go with this. That's a very truncated history version of this. It's incredibly detailed, but everybody should know that 95% of the world does not fluoridate. And of the 11 countries that provide at least half of their population with water fluoridation, our country provides fluoridated water for more humans than the other 10 countries combined. Yet decay rates are equal worldwide. This is the most updated one. This is from the World Health Organization. The blue lines are non-fluoridated countries, the red lines are fluoridated. There's virtually no difference at all in decay rates. There's other reasons why cavities are less than they used to be. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. I'm going to ask that, Dr. Malin is on, if you could get your slide presentation going. And do we have any quick questions? Otherwise, we should get into the next present. Mr. Jean.
The 2 states that had New Hampshire and Vermont, do we know if they have natural fluoride in their water supply? And the type of water supply is going to vary, whether it's groundwater or surface water.
I can't hear you for some reason.
Go ahead, repeat yourself, Mr. Jean.
I was
Okay,
just,
now I can hear you.
I was just curious if New Hampshire and Vermont have natural fluoride in their water supply. I'm sure that it will vary from well supply versus surface waters.
Yeah, almost every area has some form of naturally occurring fluoride. I don't know the exact numbers of those areas. But as I mentioned earlier, they're very different animals. So naturally occurring calcium fluoride, even in high amounts, say like in West Texas, where they have it sometimes as high as 8 parts per million. What you have to understand is that the body handles it very differently. So calcium fluoride, our body will excrete 50% immediately. We'll get rid of half of it. The other half will reside in our calcified tissues like our bones. But what you need to understand is that as a scientist, when you look at, well, how are they different? The lethal acute dose of calcium fluoride, meaning how much would we have to ingest to actually kill us? It's like 3,750 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. But when you look at the silicon fluorides, it's 125 milligrams per kilogram. 30-fold difference in what's lethally harmful to us. So very different.
Thank you. Mr. Forrest.
One quick question. Can you hear me, Doctor?
I can.
I was curious to know, I appreciate the scientific data here. We're not seeing much from any other source. I was curious to know about the onset of fluoridation and whether there were studies and collections of data that supported the decision to go ahead with fluoridation of drinking water.
Yeah, so I hinted at that. There really wasn't. I mean, honestly, if you want to get a very detailed explanation on the entire history, read The Fluoride Deception by Chris Bryson. It's incredible. He's a journalist. He has no dog in the fight. He just wanted to know what it was all about. But to answer your question very directly, it was supposed to be a very valid experiment. They compared Grand Rapids, Michigan, where they added sodium fluoride to the water, versus Muskegon, where they did not. It was supposed to be a 15-year study. Well, after 5 years, they said, it's, this is good enough. Let's just do this. And they just started fluoridating, and everybody kind of got behind it. And what's really sad is if you look at, so the ADA, the American Dental Association, our big overseer, if you will, they were adamantly against this 3 months prior to them actually fluoridating Grand Rapids, Michigan. There was quotes of them saying, we can't do this. This is going to harm our bodies. It's going to harm our brains. I mean, they knew in 1944 not to do this. But 3 months later, they started Grand Rapids, and the bandwagon got rolling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Malin. Thank you, Dr. Cole. Dr. Malin, do you have your presentation available to share with us?
Let me just share. Just one moment, sorry. Doesn't seem to be giving me the option to share my PowerPoint. I'm not sure why. Let me see if no. Hold on, I'm gonna just start a new share. Apologies.
Yeah, if she wants to say it next, you could share it.
We have the option. We could put it up here, and then
You'll just have to say next.
you'll just have to tell us when to switch.
I would just say next, okay. Actually, let me just try.
This button, I don't know if she can see me.
Yeah, that might be the best option. I'm not sure what's going on. To share. I'm not, sorry, I don't use web. Actually, wait, here we go, I think. No, I don't use WebEx very often, but that might just be the best.
I can share it, Malin.
Okay, thank you. Right. Are you able to put it into slideshow mode?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so again, thank you for having me here today. My name is Dr. Ashley Mallon. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the University of Florida and a licensed clinical psychologist. Today I'll be talking about neurodevelopment in relation to fluoride exposure. So it has been well established now for decades that high fluoride levels can cause developmental neurotoxicity, but only in the last 10 years have studies started to examine potential impacts of chronic low-level exposures on the developing brain. And in 2012, a meta-analysis was published by Philippe Grandjean and colleagues at HSPH, Harvard School of Public Health, that looked at studies on neurodevelopmental impacts of high fluoride levels, mostly conducted in other countries. And the review concluded that the results support the possibility of an adverse effect of high fluoride exposure on children's neurodevelopment. And then in 2017, there was a landmark study published in a population based in Mexico City. This was conducted in the Element cohort, and the study found that higher levels of prenatal fluoride exposure were associated with reduced IQ in the children at age 6 to 12. So they found that each 0.5 milligram per liter increase in maternal urinary fluoride in pregnancy was associated with a 2.5 point IQ reduction in the children at ages 6 to 12, as I said. Next slide, please. There was a subsequent study published in a nationally representative Canadian prospective pregnancy and birth cohort, the MyRIC cohort, published in JAMA Pediatrics in 2019. This study found that each 1 milligram per liter increase in maternal urinary fluoride across pregnancy was associated with a 4.5 point IQ reduction in the boys at ages 3 to 4. Next slide, please. And so questions have been raised as to whether these fluoride exposure levels in the Canadian and Mexican cohorts could be generalizable to those commonly encountered in the United States, whether these were typical US fluoride exposures. I led a study that was published last year that found that this was indeed the case. Urinary fluoride levels among pregnant women living in Los Angeles County were quite similar to those observed in studies conducted in Canada and Mexico that found associations of prenatal fluoride exposure with reduced IQ in children. And so there have been subsequent other studies examining prenatal fluoride exposure in relation to neurocognitive outcomes in children ranging in age from 2 to 12 years old. This one highlighted here found that in utero exposure to fluoride was associated with poor cognitive development in toddlers based in Mexico. Another study was published in Mexico City that found that higher prenatal fluoride exposure was associated with more symptoms of ADHD among children, particularly in the realm of inattention. And there was another study published in Mexico that found that higher dietary intake of fluoride exposure during pregnancy was associated with worse child cognitive outcomes in toddlerhood, particularly for boys. There was a recent study published in Calgary that found that higher exposure to fluoridated drinking water at the current recommended level was associated with poor executive function in the realm of cognitive flexibility and inhibitory control and cognitive flexibility. So those being measures of executive function. And lastly, there was a study on prenatal fluoride exposure and IQ in that same cohort, the Element cohort based in Mexico City, that examined domain-specific effects of prenatal fluoride exposure and found that the decrements in IQ may particularly be in the realm of perceptual reasoning, so visual spatial function and things like that. Next slide, please. Recently, so in August, the National Toxicology Program published a comprehensive systematic review on all the literature on fluoride exposure and neurocognitive outcomes. And this is the most rigorously conducted comprehensive systematic review of its kind, particularly from a program affiliated with several government agencies. And the NTP report found, just keep hitting the clicker, thank you. You gotta, thank you. So it focused on human studies, but also included animal studies and mechanistic studies. And it included 72 studies, and most of the studies found associations of higher fluoride exposure with reduced IQ, so 64 out of the 72. They also identified 19 studies that were determined to be at low risk of bias in terms of their methodology, and of those, 18 18 found associations of higher fluoride exposure with lower child IQ. So the NTP report concluded that there is moderate confidence in the body of evidence that estimated fluoride exposure is inversely associated with child IQ. And they said that this moderate confidence conclusion pertains at a minimum to those living in areas where fluoride in drinking water is known to be at or above 1.5 milligrams per liter. However, they said that associations between drinking water fluoride levels below 1.5 milligrams per liter and children's IQ remain unclear. And it's also important to mention this NTP report included studies up until 2023. So they felt that based on the evidence at that time, they could not make a determination about whether drinking water fluoride levels below 1.5 milligrams per liter could contribute to declines in child IQ, so they couldn't rule that in, but also could not rule that out. However, they noted that it's plausible that pregnant women and children living in optimally fluoridated communities could have a total fluoride intake that exceeds those of pregnant women living in regions with water fluoridated at 1.5 milligrams per liter or higher, because as it's been discussed today, there are multiple sources of fluoride exposure. Drinking water is not the only source of exposure. And so the NTP report highlighted a need for more US-based research on fluoride and neurodevelopment. I led a study that was published in JAMA Network Open last May. It was not included in the NTP report, but it found that higher prenatal fluoride exposure was associated with more neurobehavioral problems in children at age 3. So things like anxiety, emotion dysregulation, symptoms of autism, or medical complaints that don't have a known medical origin. These are the kinds of neurobehavioral problems observed. And now some questions have been raised about, what's the mechanism? Like, how could fluoride be negatively impacting the brain? We know from animal studies and also some human studies that fluoride can readily cross the placenta. It can enter the developing brain and accumulate in brain regions implicated in learning, memory, mood, attention, executive function. It can interfere with cholinergic activity and actually cause dysfunction at the same subunit receptor gene that is also implicated in ADHD. It has been shown to increase oxidative stress, and it can also alter glutamate metabolism, and that is something that has also been implicated in the etiology of anxiety disorder. In September, there was a ruling in a federal trial against the EPA. So this was widely publicized and really a historic case in terms of this fluoride issue. Next slide, please. And the ruling determined that the court finds that fluoridation of water at 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is the level presently considered optimal in the United States, poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children. The ruling stated the scientific literature in the record provides a high level of certainty that a hazard is present, that fluoride is associated with reduced IQ. So what the ruling concluded is that there is not enough of a margin of safety between the hazard level, which according to the NTP report exists at 1.5 milligrams per liter, or higher, and the exposure level of fluoride in drinking water for dental caries prevention, which is 0.7 milligrams per liter. And the EPA has a default standard for there to be a factor of 10 between the hazard level and the exposure level. And so, as I mentioned, the NTP report concluded with moderate confidence the hazard to child IQ exists at 1.5 milligrams per liter. And so if we apply the EPA's default standard to that, then the fluoride concentration in drinking water would need to be 0.15 milligrams per liter or lower to provide enough of a margin of safety to protect child IQ. And so I think the question for policymakers now to address is whether you're comfortable continuing the practice, knowing that you cannot reassure the public at this time that fluoride isn't causing brain damage to children. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was happy to take any questions, or you can also email me follow-up questions as well.
Thank you. 9 minutes, 55 seconds. Awesome. Questions from the commission? Mr. Force.
Did you, thank you for that quick presentation, it's very thorough. Did you give us a number, or is there a number on what the average concentration of fluoride exposure is in non-drinking water? In other words, we've heard a lot about toothpastes and other sources of fluoride that get into the human system. Is there a number on that, or is it a range, or is it not determined at the moment? I hope you understood.
So my understanding is that fluoride in dental products can be quite high, ranging from 500 parts per million or higher. Perhaps Dr. Cole, who's a dentist, might know better than me about that. But my understanding is they're astronomically high and can be catastrophic if ingested. I believe there are warnings on at least some toothpaste brands that say if you swallow more than like a pea-sized amount, contact poison control. So.
Thank you. Mr. Jean? Good. Mr. Force, anything else? No. All right, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, quick question. So what we're hearing is that there are reasons for concern. And Doctor, I'd be interested in your practice. Do you use fluoride treatments in the context of your provision of care?
I never did, no.
And do you see any incidents of decay that would be above or below a certain level or a norm?
No, so I need to be clear. I sold my clinical practice 3 years ago. I was in Austin, Texas for almost 30 years. But in that entire time, I never did any fluoride treatments, never promoted it. I even told my patients, do you want to brush with it? You can, but I'm not selling that kind of paste in my practice. Never saw, now maybe I was in a kind of a nice area, maybe more of a, my patients were very informed and they might take better care of themselves, but no, I did not see any difference in decay rates at all.
And a question for Dr. Mallon, relative to the form and substance of the fluoride, do any of the studies differentiate between the type of fluoride, whether it's calcium fluoride or other types of fluoride, and their impacts on neurological development?
Yeah, so these studies generally look at fluoride exposure from all sources, usually measured in a biomarker such as urine, most commonly, sometimes in plasma, but that will capture all types of fluoride. We know from EPA reports that community drinking water is the main source of fluoride exposure among adults in the United States.
Mayor, I do have one other question.
Yes, Mr. Force.
To both speakers, when I've examined, and others perhaps have done the same, the data on this issue, and it's mentioned in the San Francisco or the Northern California District Court ruling, studies in China and Mexico are cited, but not studies in the United States. the information presented to me today about studies in the United States was the first I've heard of any of this. And I'm wondering if you can explain that. Why did the judge not cite the studies that you cited in making the determination in that case in the Northern District of California, which was very recent?
So the judge was relying predominantly on the NTP report, as Dr. Mallon said. So he was trying to condense this into something that both parties, both the plaintiffs and the defendants, could agree that were acceptable. And as Dr. Mallon stated, he got down to a very small number, like 18 to 19, extremely high quality, good scientific method, low bias studies, and that's what he relied on. But yes, I showed you that there have been numerous studies that were done that were trying to prove that water fluoridation worked, but when you actually look at the data, it showed that it was very insignificant. And as Dr. Mallon mentioned, she did have a study in Los Angeles, in this country, but it was just a tiny bit too late to make it to that NTP report.
Thank you.
Although the earlier study that I mentioned, looking at distributions of urinary fluoride in the pregnant women in Los Angeles, was included in the legal proceedings in the trial against the EPA. So that one was included.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cole. Thank you, Dr. Malin. Appreciate you showing up here today for this important topic. And I'd like to thank the general public. It looks like we have more people in attendance today than the Water Commission normally has a privilege to see. So we are committed to continue looking at the safety of our drinking water, and the uncertainty of these recent rulings causes, I think, us to take a closer look and stay informed and keep you informed as we move forward. As I mentioned earlier, this was information only today. If we were to take a different approach moving forward, we would either have public hearings. Some cities out there in the world have done referendums, but we will keep this on the radar moving forward. So appreciate you attending today, and stay tuned. Scott, did you have anything you want to finalize here?
I too would thank people for coming. We often have an empty chamber here when we meet, so thank you.
It's an important issue. That's why you have more people here today.
Thank you. All right. Up next, item 5, update on financial operating capital budgets. And I don't know if we have Mary Ann here today. What we had, this was a request from Mr. Forrest to tune up the
I can
quarterly
postpone.
finance.
I'm happy with postponing that in view of the fact that we've already gone for 90 minutes today. Thank
So
you.
we will, so our intention is to bring what that potential new format will look like for us on our quarterly basis. All right, we'll look at that next month. Item 6 is update on meter replacements and the schedule moving forward into 2025. And we have Scott here, Mr. Bors, to be able to update us.
So I put a memo in the packet. I'm not sure if anybody's got any questions. There's a lot of things that we're finding in the system. It's actually pretty interesting. We removed a meter from 1973 that's been in service. So we have some things to catch up on and some things to improve upon. So if you have any questions.
The good news is we have a great inventory now. We had a lull especially during COVID, where we had a supply chain issue. We had a hard time getting into homes, so we're catching up on all the dead and under-reporting meters. They're doing a great job, and I can't remember the goal. We're looking for like 4,000 next year. Don't quote me on that, but we're doing more than we've done in a long time to help the bottom line.
Just curious about the was it 1973? What was it? How was it reading?
It was failing.
Oh,
Not reading. No.
Do we test all the meters that come out?
We do.
Each and every one? Is that PSC requirement?
It is PSC requirement to test. We can get by with partial testing, but what we're finding is when we're putting the new meters in place and the ones we're removing our old, there's a big disparity between the reads. So we want to test to make sure we test them on the way out, so we have the meter accuracy when we have any kind of concerns for overbilling with the new meters.
So in other words, we do correlate, because that'd be interesting to see, of these 1,603, what the revenue change would be. Could we print a report to that effect?
It would be hard to know what kind of water use the residents had that the meter was failing. So a household of 6 is going to use more water, or we would lose more water with a bad reading meter than we would with maybe an elderly person in a home that's got a failing meter.
One other quick question or comment. Are we changing to, are hours of changing meters the same hours that we work, or are we extending the day in some cases to get people that aren't available during those time hours?
We are trying to keep them in normal working hours, but we are making exceptions to get those changed outside of that.
Yeah, those tests, I think that's good data. So if we could look at it moving forward, I would imagine we could make some estimated averages on it. But I suffice it to say, I don't believe we found any that were over-reporting. Is that?
No.
Okay, so we're making headway in the right direction. Up next is item 7, is the update on lead service line replacement for 2024 and the proposed 2025 schedule. Eric.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of in parallel keep you up to date. We, for 2025, we brought a reimbursement resolution for the proposed loan and grant for 2025 to the Finance Committee for their consideration. That'll go to council next week. So in 2025, you'll see in the packet that we did very well as far as principal forgiveness. We're getting about 8.8 million, which is essentially a grant, and 6.1 million in loan. So moving forward, there will be a determination on the payment of that loan moving forward. So in 2024, we still haven't closed on with the DNR. They've been dragging their feet, and so some of it had to do with the language with CIP agreement. So we're working through that with them. Hopefully that will be, we'll actually have a closing date here coming up in the next month or two, hopefully, with the DNR. At this point, it would almost make sense to close them both at the same time, but we'll see how they feel about that too. That would save us some money. I think for 2025, the water utility will be looking with Ellers as well, determining, how much is going to be paid. It can be paid from the utility on an annual basis versus the TIDS versus general obligation, and what other funding sources there would be for that, because the loan portion is going to be strictly for the public side. With the principal forgiveness we received, that covers 100% of the proposed private side. So homeowners for 2025 that we're proposing, the 1900 replacements, will be covered 100% for the principal forgiveness, which is really good news.
This information will go to council on Ted. Mr. Robinson, you've got your hand up.
I was going to raise the issue of how are we going to pay for it. So when the hours report comes in, if we were looking at a $6.1 million loan relative to the public side, what sort of impact, worst case scenario, would that have on rates? Do we have any idea?
Well,
we don't. Yeah, John, I couldn't speak to that. Those are some of the scenarios that we're going to have to run through, with Ellers. I don't know what the annual, it's a 20-year loan, so I don't know what the annual, it's 1/4 of 1%, 0.25%. But I didn't run those numbers, and
that's the $6.1 million question, Correct. Mr. Robinson. So there's several different buckets potentially available to us. So there's several
I think there's options.
There's options. So
Yeah.
the portion that's going to be the loan could be put on the utility side, so it could go onto the rate side.
Right.
And you have the levy side, and you have other potentials. So we haven't fully vetted that out. But it's a obligation that was put in motion a couple of years ago now, so we will have to figure out where we balance that out. You still have another question, Mr. Robinson?
You know,
I'm good.
Okay, I brought this forward to kind of stay in parallel so the commission's aware of what's happening moving forward. So so as things happen on the city side, from the finance committee to the city council and determinations, we'll keep the commission up to date on any potential recommendations and things moving forward as well.
Good to go. Okay, up next is this kind of a neat little new item here. Discussion and possible action approving a sole source and contract with Estera for leak detection, satellite imagery, and leak location. So this is some new technology and a partnership that may include other municipalities. And Eric, you've got the details?
Yeah. I don't have the cost yet in detail, but it is a collaboration with Weston, Schofield, City of Wausau, Rib Mountain. And so it's a technology that's newer, and they use radio waves to actually penetrate the ground through satellite imagery to determine where potential leaks are in the distribution system. And so Green Bay's been using it for about 6 years, and they do it. They've been extremely happy with it. It saved them a ton of time evaluating the entire system where they can just focus on certain areas. There's other municipalities that have begun to use it as well. We're still going to need boots on the ground, but what this does is it identifies areas, like maybe a 4 to 6 block square area versus looking at an entire subdivision or something like that. So I think it's great technology. It's been proven. And I think over time, maybe if we do a biannual, picture of the system or annual or whatever it might be, I'm guessing that the city's portion for City of Wausau would be the majority of it because we have the largest system, obviously. We're thinking it's going to be around $40,000 to $50,000 initially. Like I said, I don't have those details yet. Obviously, nobody else has this technology to do it, so this is a unique. So I don't have the cost at this point. We would plan on doing it in the spring, probably a March, April timeframe in '25. I'd be happy to bring it back next week with the costs. I think I'll have them here in the next couple of weeks. If you're not comfortable approving the sole source without the actual cost, that's fine as well.
I like the concept. I'm pleased that the other communities are participating with us. That's a rarity in Wausau, and I applaud that. I'd like to see numbers before I approve the sole source, but I certainly am not opposed to sole sourcing technology like this.
All right.
All right, we'll put it on the agenda next time, and
Yep.
looks promising.
Great.
All right, up next is discussion on the WDNR biannual wastewater treatment plant inspection and Class A exceptional quality biosolids final determination, and Ben has the news on that.
Sure. On November 20th, the biannual inspection of the wastewater treatment plant by 5 DNR representatives happened, and the inspection itself went very well. We received verbal communications from Fred Hageman, the biosolids coordinator, that we've been approved for Class A, so we can move forward with plans for distribution to the public and agricultural at this point. There was talk of excluding a mercury limit during the inspection in the next issuance of the permit and the next term, which is 5 years. Since the meeting, I've received notification or email notification from our basin engineer that we will not have a mercury limit in our next permit term, as well as an effluent copper limit. The potential for exceedance, 1-day and 30-day P99 study was not indicative exceeding that, so they decided that it wasn't necessary. So that's a good thing. We don't have those limits in our next permit. We'll be what I've understood, that we'll be receiving a draft permit sometime in June, early July. So we'll be able to review that and send it on to legal for review as well at that point in time. And I'm waiting on the inspection report.
Right.
To respond to that.
I think overall, I mean, it was a long inspection, obviously. I think staff has done an exceptional job, not only going through the construction and the rehab with the new facility, but also implementing the new processes in the treatment. And so our effluent has been very high quality. We're doing very well, obviously, on our drying the biosolids, reducing that volume, and also now getting the Class A classification, so which is incredibly helpful for us as we move forward. So I commend the wastewater utility for everything that they're doing on a day-to-day basis to make this thing work and be exceptional for the state of Wisconsin and the area. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? All right, up next, I see we've got Brad Wentland waiting in the back. You picked a awesome meeting to do this one. We have recognition and award recipient Brad Wentland here today from wastewater plant, and he received the water plant operator of the year award from the I got the whole letter here. Ben, did you want to present this? How do we want to do this?
Just recognizing Brad Wentland for a job well done. Brad received the North Central District Regional Operator of the Year Award at the Wisconsin Wastewater Operators Association Conference, which was held in Appleton in October. The award recognizes an individual whose dedication, skills, and expertise go above and beyond the call of duty. This award celebrates the unwavering commitment to protecting one of our most valuable assets.
Stand up, Brad.
Come on up here, Brad.
Brad.
Feel free to give us some wisdom.
It was a long process to get the upgrade done. Like I say, hundreds of hours of call-ins and overtime and early mornings, late nights, and the rest of the staff. A lot of us together to get it done. And but 14 years with the utility here now, so kind of seen and done all of it, and just trying to keep it upright. So.
That award's a big deal, Brad. Congratulations.
Well deserved, Brad.
Brad,
Well
before you
deserved.
walk away, I met Brad when we were making visits for the new equipment at our wastewater treatment plant. And I said to Brad, we're taking sludge not out to the fields, we were taking it to the dump, at the landfill, I should say. And I said, Brad, you got to make it a mission to get that material out on the fields. It's saving us a lot of money. And he took good care of it. He did a great job. So thank you and congratulations.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. Okay, we have one item slipping in the back of the packet. It was an addendum, discussion and possible action on approving a sole source with Geschirk Ford for cargo van. And I believe that one is yours, Mr.
Yeah,
Horst.
that's mine. So this is the van that the vehicle you guys approved for purchase at the last commission meeting. I did not bring it back as a sole source at that time because I had a PO from August that I assumed would carry, or at least hold some weight going through with this new purchase. So I'm asking for a approval of a sole source for this van to be purchased through Kucheruk. This is the only all-wheel drive van that's available on the market now, so we could go to different Ford dealers and get numbers, but we wanted to stay local.
I move we approve.
Motion from Forrest, second from Gene to buy the van, sole source. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
cost?
Oh, sorry.
What's the cost?
The cost is $60,118.50.
Yeah, so it is in the packet, $60,118.50 for the record. And without further questions, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. The next meeting is scheduled for January 7th at 11 a.m. right here, 2025. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. From Gene, second by Force. All in favor? See you later. Thank you, Gina. Hey,
Pretty presentation. Gonna make a paper out of that?
Oh, the gap.
Yeah.